Welcome to today's session. My name is Zoe Clark. I'm Senior Self-Management Programme Officer here at NASS. And today I'm joined by Ruth Larkin. Hi Ruth, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Well, as good as we can be.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ruth is a Pilates teacher and also a sports therapist as well. You may have seen Ruth's previous session last month where she did a whole exercise session based on exercises that help loosen you, particularly in the mornings. And today we're going to be doing some seated exercises so that you can do these either with a chair or with a Swiss ball like Ruth has got with her today. So we're having a bit of a catch up just now, Ruth, and for anyone who didn't watch your previous session, Ruth does also have AS like myself, and we were just discussing sort of how you're feeling today and actually how this session is quite well timed for you, isn't it?
Yes, I was just saying I've been moving house recently, and so the schedule has been really hectic with sort of fitting in work kind of around renovations and that kind of thing. And I'm really lucky because my condition is sort of over the last 6 months or so much better managed than it has been previously. But yes, things do take their toll when you're a bit tired. And I have fusion in my right sacroiliac joint, and my right hip is really giving me some jip today. So I'm right here with you, and hopefully the things that I'm going to show you, it's nice and gentle, and as Zoe said, it can be done on a chair or on one of these. I find sometimes the Swiss ball is actually a little bit more comfy than a chair because it's got that give. But whatever you want to try, whatever you've got to hand, hopefully we can make everything just feel a little bit more comfortable, and get some sort of ideas of things we can do if you're perhaps restricted to chair stuff at the moment, or if that's something that's more comfortable for you.
Perfect, thank you. And yeah, hopefully I'll be feeling better for you afterwards as well. Yes, hi to Dawn who's watching, thanks for joining us. For anyone who hasn't joined a session before, if you can't stay for the whole session, then don't worry, because the video will stay on our Facebook page, and we'll also upload it onto my YouTube and also our webpage, My AS My Life. So you'll be able to come back, catch up. And if you're new to Pilates, you may well just want to sit and watch this session, and then try the exercises later on in your own time if you'd like to, by watching on catch up. So oh, and also, yeah, we've got some time at the end for some questions as well. So if you've got any questions for Ruth, please do pop them in the comments as we go through, and we'll make sure we cover them at the end. So I think that's everything from me. Anything to add, Ruth, before I hand over to you?
No, I'm like ready to just, as usual, see what falls out of my brain. I'll try not to, go into too long a session, but yeah, we'll cover, just the basics of how we can make things a bit easier, how we can make things a bit more challenging, with the same equipment.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm looking forward to joining in with this one because I can keep an eye on the comments while sitting and doing the exercises as well. So I look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Lovely. So I'll hand over to you now.
Great. So yes, as I mentioned, we're going to be I'm going to be using my Swiss ball today, but if you're on a chair, that's absolutely fine. Obviously, just make sure that if you do need to be on a chair, that you're on a nice stable surface. If you're using your ball as well, we want to make sure that you don't have sort of anything too crazy around you, so just in case you wobble a little bit, because that is half of the fun. And the Swiss ball is something that I really like to use for general fitness, because you can actually make exercises a lot more challenging by using it. But equally, you can make things a lot more accessible by doing things in a seated position. So the other thing I've got with me, which we might use today as well, is my little resistance band. Because when we're seated, it's a good opportunity to do a little bit of work on upper body strength as well. Don't worry if you don't have a resistance band. Some of the stretches we can do just using a belt or a scarf, but it might be interesting just to see what we can do if you are restricted to a seated position, or perhaps you're somebody that works at a desk quite a lot, and you're looking for some ideas to just make that position a little bit more comfortable. Swiss ball as well, I use quite a lot in postnatal recovery, really nice to support that kind of process. And of course, if you've had any joint replacements, particularly hips, it's really good for recovery for that as well. But don't worry, again, if you don't have one of these, just be in a chair, that's absolutely fine. So, of course, we're going to start just sitting up on top. So let's just make sure that you can see all of me. Here we go. Now, these do, if you are interested in working with a Swiss ball or getting one, they come in different sizes. So it just relates to how tall you are. I think this one is a 55 and I'm about 5'7". So if you're sort of, you know, generally we want to be, if you're on a ball or in a chair, we want to be in this nice tall spine position, hips at right angles, knees at right angles. And we've got the feet just grounded on the floor, the same sort of distance apart as your hips. So we're not thinking about the outside of your hips, which could be a variable size. We're thinking about the sitting bones, and we've got that little distance from here. So the first thing that I'm going to do, if you're in a chair, make sure you're not leaning into the back of the chair. We want to have this feeling of being sort of, you know, slightly perched, so that we're actually using the core already to get a nice tall posture. I'm going to turn back just so you can see what I'm doing. I'll switch around so you get a different view to make sure that you can see exactly what's happening. So if you're sitting in a chair, up nice and tall, but we're not trying to sort of overcorrect everything. We want the shoulders feeling balanced above the hips, those knees and ankles pointing forwards. And I just want you to relax your arms just slightly away from the edge of your chair and take a nice big deep breath. And try and relax your shoulders even more as you breathe out. Very good. So we're almost just getting a sense of where we are in space, getting a sense of that proprioception. So if you are sitting on a ball, you could even try closing your eyes for a second, just to see whether that sort of makes your balance a little bit more challenging. And a simple exercise like that, whether you're seated, you could do it kneeling, you could do it standing on one leg if you're feeling brave. Something as simple as that is really, really helpful for our balance and all of that mechanism that goes through the body. So the first thing I'm going to do is just a little pelvic tilt. So we did these lying on the floor before. I'm just going to tuck my tailbone underneath, pulling my tummy back. So I come into like a little slouch. And then I'm just going to correct it and sit nice and tall. So again, pulling the tummy back, come into a slouch, and then coming up. So if you're on a chair, you could also be on a cushion and thinking about scooching the cushion underneath you using your sitting bones, and then pushing your sitting bones back again. So we're just tilting the pelvis underneath, squeezing those tummy muscles in, and then coming all the way up. And I'm trying not to hold on to anything, so that this is being done just by these lower core muscles here. My shoulders stay relaxed, because with most of our Pilates exercises, what we want is to think about what are we moving, what are we not moving. So here, I'm using my tummy muscles as I move the pelvis, but I'm keeping the shoulders nice and relaxed. Good. And then we're going to come all the way back up to that nice tall posture, making sure those shoulders are still relaxed. It's really easy to get tense when you're thinking about your posture. Good. And then from here, really simple, I'm going to lift up one heel and then come onto just one foot. Now you can see that I'm a bit wobbly on my ball, but if you're on a chair and it's a little bit more stable, it's still challenging through the front of that thigh. And then we're going to come back down again. And again, trying to keep those shoulders relaxed whilst working on that balance, keeping the spine up really nice and tall. So if I turn to the side again, you'll see what I mean by that. If we just keep going with those single foot lifts, when you lift up one foot, whether you're on a ball or a chair, your body is going to want to send you backwards. So that's what we're trying to work against, keeping everything up nice and tall through the spine. And of course, your spine is going to be a different shape from mine. So we're always thinking about, ooh, you can see the issue that I'm having with my right hip today, is that it doesn't want to stabilize on the floor. So this nice small movement is actually really good for me. So this is normally my left leg, my wobbly side, but actually just today, just because as we know, this is all very unpredictable, I'm a bit wobbly on the right hand side. Good. So we can start to extend this movement with a little bit more challenge. So I'm going to lift one foot up and then just see, squeezing the tummy in a little bit more. Can I start to lengthen that leg out forwards? Woo! And then bend and back down. So again, if you're perched on a chair or you're perched on the middle of your ball, let's just see. Now, you might not be able to stretch your hamstring all the way out. So I've got quite a lot of mobility in my hamstring. So all you're going to see is where you can get to and then come back. So make it fit your body. There's no kind of right or wrong answer here. It just depends what you can manage. And then extend, keeping up nice and tall. So again, the challenge is here, not to tip backwards. As the leg comes forward, I'm thinking of pulling my tummy in and growing up taller, taller, taller through the crown of my head. Good. And we're going to do one more each side, lifting heel first. So we come into it nice and carefully. See if we can stretch that leg forwards. And I'm keeping my toes pointed because if you flex, you get even more stretch on the back of the leg. So just makes it, again, a little bit more accessible in the back of the leg. And it's a nice active way to stretch through your hamstring. Very good. Now, from here, if you get really stiff in the lower part of the back, sitting on the ball and just having a little bounce is actually really nice. Maybe you're in a chair and you're on a cushion and you can just have a tiny sort of little bounce and you can see that I'm just getting this little bit of height and hopefully my spine is getting a little bit of lengthening, a little bit of movement. But don't worry if you're not on a bouncy surface. There's going to be some options coming up as well. So we've already started to work through our quads at the front of the thighs. Really important to keep those strong. So we're going to come into a sort of modified, almost like a sort of squat practice. So all I'm going to do is swing my arms forward and just lift up slightly and then come back down. So I'm trying not to lose the ball underneath. And just lift, pause, and back down. I'm going to breathe in as I lift and out as I come back down. Breathing in. Good. Really good practice. If this sort of sit to stand movement becomes quite difficult, because all of our movements really depend on our balance between our flexibility and our mobility. Good. It's that strength that we need in the quads to get up and down. So you might feel those muscles start to work, even with this nice little small mini lift. I'm squeezing my tummy muscles in as well as I come forward, breathing in and out. I'm just keeping the weight firmly balanced between both feet. Toes are grounded. Good. And let's go for 3. And 2. And 1. Very nice. And of course, you can extend that movement. You might be standing all the way up if you're on a chair and then just sitting all the way back down again with control. Lovely. So we can work the core here as well. So you might be having lots of space if you're on the ball, or you might, if you're on a chair with a back on it, you might want to turn sideways on your chair because we're going to lean backwards slightly. So again, we're perched in the center of your seat without any support behind you. And instead of going forwards this time, I'm just going to lean back slightly. I'm going to pull my tummy in, keep the shoulders down, counterbalance with the arms, and just lean back and breathe in to come up. So it's like a sort of reverse sit-up. Good. And these ones we're starting nice and small, but of course you can extend and lean back slightly more to give yourself more challenge. There's always a way to make it much more challenging. There's always a way to just make the movement a little bit smaller. Good. Just to make it accessible, whatever stage you're at. You know, sometimes I can do really fancy things, and other days like today, my hip's just not playing ball, literally, excuse the pun. There we go. So we're just leaning back so you can feel a tightening in the middle of those tummy muscles and then recovering. And your arms are just gently Getting a little bit of movement. Good. So simple, but really effective if you're working on your tummy muscle strength. Lovely. Let's do 2 more if we can. Just leaning and lift nice and tall, and again, leaning and lift nice and tall. Very good. So I think after that, we can come into a nice little bit of mobility. Now we're working on our strength, so it balances things up. So just a simple side stretch. One hand down the side. You could even hold on to the edge of your chair and then just lean up and over. So we get this sense of length down that underneath side of your ribs, kind of just here. And again, some of you might be able to lean over a little bit more. Some of you might be feeling a bit more restricted. So just do what you can. And then as we recover, we're going to breathe in to grow tall and just come all the way over to the other side. And again, if you're on the ball, it's quite a challenge not to topple over. So this is why we need a bit of space around us. Good. One more each side, breathing in, stretching up and over. Good. And again, breathing in, stretching up. Very nice. So I like to kind of keep switching between parts of the body. And I thought one of the things we could do whilst we're seated is have a little bit of a think about our feet. Now, I know lots of us suffer with a bit of plantar fasciitis, you know, that tight and hot feeling, sometimes crunchy on the bottom of your feet. You might get pain around your heels. So I've got my resistance band here, but you could do this just with a tea towel or any other kind of towel or scarf that you've got lying around. So I'm just going to lengthen it out in front of me. I'm going to put my foot up on top, and you could do this standing up as well, but it's quite nice to do it seated. I'm still thinking about my posture. All I'm going to do is lift up my toes and then flatten them down. And I'm not trying to sort of scrunch up here. I'm trying to flatten the balls of my toes down, and then I'm trying to pull back. So it's almost like creating a little bit of a tent in the middle of your foot. If I do it with my other foot, you might be able to see my arch a little bit clearer. So I'm flattening out through my toes, and then I'm drawing back. Your toes might scrunch, so don't worry too much about that. But we're just activating this arch of the foot, and I'm going to release the toes and go again. And just pull back. So I'm spreading out my toes almost like a sort of Mexican wave and trying to flatten down through the balls of the feet and then pulling back. Now, don't worry if it starts to cramp. It just might mean that you actually need to do a little bit of this work through your feet. And when you get to the end of your towel or your scarf, then you can just do the other foot as well. One of the reasons that I like to focus on the feet, I do work with a lot of dancers, but obviously when we have sort of any sort of inflammatory conditions or anything that sort of affects our joints, it can really affect your balance. And so the grounding through your feet is super important. And if you can keep sort of that, you know, dexterity through your toes, and you can keep all of those soft tissues working and a little bit more malleable, it should help with those symptoms, whether if you do get any plantar fasciitis or anything like that. So when we've had a go with both feet, kind of just moving through, we might find that the balancing is a little bit easier. So whether you're seated or whether you want to stand up and repeat, just a little single leg lift up. Are we feeling grounded now more through the other foot? Let's see if I am. Can I balance a little bit more on this troublesome right hip today? Ooh, I think I can. Good. So it's that real feel of sort of control through your body, not just various parts of it. It's kind of, you know, getting back in touch with our system. You know, you might have some areas of your body that are a bit numb or, you know, kind of don't behave because of, you know, nerve compression somewhere or the inflammation. As with me, it might just be a little bit unpredictable. Good. And we're going to release all the way from there. Lovely. So the next thing that we can have a look at is maybe a little bit of upper body. So I'm going to use my stretchy band again. Again, don't worry if you don't have one of these, because lots of this can be done holding tins of beans, or you can do the stretch just using a belt or a scarf. So I'm going to give myself lots and lots of slack because I don't want to put too much pressure on my shoulders. First off, holding the arms out nice and straight, I'm just going to see if I can lift all the way up and over, keeping my elbows straight. Now, this might seem like quite a big movement, so don't worry if it's just completely inaccessible for your shoulders to lift all the way up and open. And you can have the arms as wide as you need to get that shoulder movement going. It might be something that you do a few times, and then you might find that you're able to hold whatever you're holding a little bit closer together to get that nice open stretch all the way through. As I say, don't worry if you can't go all the way back, just go where you can get to, and then relaxing down. It's just that open chest stretch. You have stiffness through your rib cage, this is quite nice. Just quite nice to get those shoulders moving, but keeping them pulling down. So what we often do, particularly with those sort of difficult necks as well, which we sometimes get, is we tend to see this sort of hunching coming up here. So we want to keep this seated sense of height as we lift up and over, keeping those shoulders down. You can feel it's actually quite hard work, even though it's, you know, a bit of a stretch. Good. So we're always flicking between stretching and strengthening with these exercises. So what I'm going to do now is hook my band underneath my feet. And again, you could just be holding on to something a little bit heavy. And then I'm going to row back, pulling my elbows in towards my waist. So we're getting front of the arms. And those of you that struggle maybe to get on and off the floor, or if you do use any walking aids like a stick or crutches or anything like that at any time, you'll know that your upper body and arm strength is super important to help you get around. So this is another reason I wanted to do a little bit of this today. It was something that was really important for me actually when I was in hospital back in 2018, because I couldn't use my legs at all for about 2 weeks. So getting around, I was completely reliant on shuffling myself around with my upper body strength. So even at times when you might be restricted in your movements, you might find it really challenging to do anything that's not in a chair, we can still get strong from here. Good. So I'm keeping those elbows pulling in towards my waist, and again keeping those shoulders down, neck nice and long, because all of the time that I'm sitting up tall without any support behind me, we're still working that core strength. Very good. And then we're going to go the other way. So if you're using a band, or if you want to in the future, we're going to have it behind the back of your body if you're holding on to any weight, or if you're just doing it without, shoulders down and elbows in. And then all I'm going to do is push forwards now. So we're just using those muscles more around the underarm and pushing out. And it's quite challenging again just to keep that posture. So even though this is an arm exercise, we're still working that core, we're still working that postural strength. So I'm thinking all the time, crown of the head up tall, shoulders down. If you're doing all of this sat on a ball, it's really quite challenging. You might be feeling your tummy getting a little bit tired by now. So let's add in a little bit of rotation, because this can be really, really important for our spinal mobility, but also if you have any problems around your rib cage, you might find this a challenge. So this is quite a nice thing to do, whether you've got a stretchy band, or whether you've got a little weight in your hand, or whether you're just using a scarf. Shoulders down, and this time I'm just going to push one hand forward, and I'm going to allow my ribs to rotate round to the side, and then slowly recover back to the front, and then to the other side. And you'll notice the difference. This side I can barely turn and back, but this side I've got a lot more rotation. So it's something that I work on quite a bit because I know that rotating through this middle part of my back is quite challenging, particularly to this side for me. Good. But I just keep trying. And when you find something challenging, breathing out can often be helpful because it makes us relax a bit more. So if you get to the end of where you think you can go, can you breathe out any more? Just to get a little bit more movement. Let's try it on my dodgy side. So I'm going to breathe out. Yes, lots more there. And of course, we're still working all those muscles through the arms if you're using a resistance band or weights. Or if you're not into using any weights just yet, then just moving, using your arms without anything in, is also perfectly valid. So you just make everything fit to what you can manage. Obviously, when we talk about graded exercise, you might have heard that term. Sometimes we need to grade down as well as up. It's not always about just consistently making things more and more challenging. Very good. And then we're going to come all the way back. Lovely. So I'm going to get rid of anything from here. And the next thing that I'm going to show you is just how to modify another one of my favorites is my lovely planking, using a chair or, again, a ball. So what I'm going to do is come just to kneel down. So either your ball or your chair in front of you. And if you do have a hard chair, you probably want to have a cushion on. So all I'm going to do is pop my forearms down here. So this is a plank. This might be your version of a plank. As long as you're leaning your body weight forward enough that you feel your tummy muscles engaging, that's absolutely fine. And this, I think I mentioned last time, was one of the ways that I sort of got myself back fit in 2018, because I couldn't lie on my back at all. So doing things like this, which is a position I could sort of just about start with, was really helpful to get things moving. So of course, you can then just progress. You could have the ball a little bit further away from you, and of course it makes it much, much harder. You could then progress all the way out to a full plank, but that is very, very challenging. And whether you're on a chair or on a ball, it's really, really hard weight bearing through your shoulders, but also from here. But we can still work those shoulders just by leaning our body weight forwards a bit and then back a bit. So you feel that you get a little bit more weight into the shoulders, and then you use your tummy to scooch back. Now, you might need cushions under your knees for this. Good. Move forwards and back. Lovely. And again, we're just making sure that we're safe. And if you were doing this for the first time with a ball, you might even want to have the ball up against a wall, so you've got some resistance there. Could make you feel really nice and safe. Good. Lovely, and you can really feel that working. And in fact, I'm not really moving very much, just in this slight kneeling modification. Lovely. And then just to relax, I'm going to bring the ball underneath my tummy and just lie all the way over the top. Now, the last one that I'm going to do, it may not work very well with a chair, but it does work really well with a ball. Or if you're up to doing it without anything underneath, then that's absolutely fine too. But what I'm going to do is just stretch my legs out into this just sort of supported push-up position, I call it. So again, slightly wobbly over the ball. And all I'm going to do is lift one leg up slightly and then down. So this just gives us an opportunity to work again through the glutes and the back of the leg. So if you do have inflammation sort of around your lower back, then it can affect kind of, you know, your sensation around those glute muscles. I have a big numb patch on this side, so sometimes I have to give it a bit of a poke to wake up. But it's a nice alternative to work the glutes without having to lie on your side on the floor and do some of the exercises that we did last time. And again, you can progress this to doing an arm and a leg as well. Maybe. It's always a maybe. Maybe we're just practicing getting a little lift through here. Very nice. Good. And then I'm just going to drop the knees to nice and safely come all the way up. And then I think we will round off with another nice seated stretch. So we've done a little bit of rotating here. So I'm going to give you all the options depending on how your hips and your spine feel. Some of us might be able to get into quite a deep position. Others might need to be a little bit more gentle. So really, really simple. I'm just going to cross one leg over, opposite hand onto the knee, other hand round to the back of your ball or your chair, and just rotate yourself round. Now, as I breathe in, I'm going to go tall through the crown of my head, shoulders down, and as I breathe out, can I get any more rotation there? It's kind of in the middle of the back that you want to feel that rotation. Now in this position, you might also be feeling a stretch down the outside of your thigh, just depending on how your hips are. If you don't already feel a stretch, you might need to take it a little bit further. So we might see whether we can bring, again, this is much easier on the chair, ankle over the opposite knee. And so we've got this nice sort of middle glute stretch going on. And then again, if you're quite mobile, if you don't feel it, then you could lean forwards. Ooh, there we go. We feel that stretch down the outside. And again, this is a stretch that we can do lying on your back. But if you're not lying on your back and doing things at the moment, we can just translate it into this chair position as well. You might feel it quite intense kind of through the middle of the glutes. And getting that rotation on the leg will just kind of help, particularly if you've got any issues with sciatica or any of those types of symptoms. This can often just help release the muscles around that sciatic nerve. Good. And then of course we want to go on the other side. So I'm just going to cross the other leg over, opposite hand to the knee, other hand round to the back, growing tall through the spine, and then a little rotation. Ooh, crunch, right on cue. There we go. And again, depending on how you feel, this might be the position that's a really nice sort of little bit of a stretch. It might be something that you're working on. You might already feel that stretch down the outer hip and the thigh. But if you don't yet, or if you want to try, we're going to come into more of this position. It could look a bit more like this. It could be all the way open, again, depending on how your hips are behaving. And you may even then need to just lean the weight forward to get that seated stretch here. Very good. And then we don't want to hold static stretches for a very long time because really kind of sometimes it can just become more uncomfortable. And when we think about stretching, we're not actually really changing the length of anything. What we're doing is improving our tolerance to that sensation, which is quite sort of, you know, a difficult thing because we often think of stretching as, you know, getting things longer. But actually, we just want to make sure that we're just becoming a little bit more tolerant to these positions. So that's why practicing regularly is really, really helpful because it helps your body get used to those sensations. So make sure you do sort of a little bit every day. Good. The last thing we're going to do If you're on a chair or if you're on a ball, it's much more challenging on the ball because it's wobbly, but it's a good enough core challenge if you're perched on a chair. So I'm actually going to hold on to the side. You can hold on to your chair just lightly. And we're going to see, because we've been practicing lifting the feet off the floor, if we can do both of them. So if you're on a chair, maybe try one first, and then maybe try the other one. If you're on a ball, you might need to lean back. Woohoo! And then you'll notice that if you're on the ball and it's wobbly, all the little muscles kind of around the support of the spine have to work to stop you falling from one side to the other. If you're on a chair, you're still going to get a really good sense of lift and workout through the deep core muscles and the hip flexors just by lifting those feet up. Very good. I almost feel like a bit of an elephant at the circus. But again, balancing is just, I mean, it's a bit silly, but it's a bit fun. But it also really, really helps with our stability and the control through the body. Lovely. And then I'm just going to stretch my legs out, flex the feet, and have a little stretch forward. And you might feel that nice stretch all the way down the backs of your calves. Again, we're just getting to where you can get to. You might not get the legs all the way straight. You might just be kind of here and leaning forwards, and you can feel that stretch. So again, there's no right or wrong when it comes to our positioning. Just as long as you're getting a sensation of a little bit of a pull down the backs of the legs. And then we're going to come all the way up. And let's just roll those shoulders out. And I think we've managed to get pretty much like a full body workout in there, whilst mostly sitting in a chair. So there's lots and lots of things you can do. And as well, you know, the equipment that I've been using, you don't need to necessarily have the specialized equipment, but if you do want it, it's all really, really easily available. None of it's particularly expensive. And lots of them actually come with little leaflets with ideas of things that you can do as well. So I hope you find some of this useful. If you do have any specific questions, I will nod back to Zoe and we'll see what we can do. I'm just going to come in, I think, nice and safely sit down so I can see you a little bit better from here.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Ruth.
No worries.
It's really nice. We've got lots of people watching, but very few comments coming in, which is always a good sign that people are trying it out and seeing how they find it. We've had a lovely comment from Robin already saying thank you for the session, because he's really enjoyed having the variety of different exercises, and he said especially sort of rotating on different areas of the body. He said he can see that being really helpful to make a workout a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a little bit of you know, a sort of teacher's trick really, because actually the Pilates syllabus is not really a huge amount of work, but just changing the position that you're in can make it feel like a whole different sort of workout. And as well, I like to kind of, you know, chop and change into sort of whether I'm using resistance or balance and that kind of thing, because I mean, it does get really dull sometimes when you have to, you know, go through some of these exercises. So, I mean, I normally have my music on when I'm doing something just as a bit of distraction, but there are other people that I work with who will say that actually they know their routine and they do the same thing and it works for them, and that's totally fine as well. And as I said before, it's not always about consistently trying to make things more challenging. It's about doing what makes you feel better at the end of it. Yeah,
that's really nice, sort of, because it brings that body awareness, doesn't it, where you're thinking, how am I feeling at the moment? Is this the right amount of challenging, the right amount of stretch? And I think particularly for Axial SpA, because things fluctuate, I was going to say each day, probably each hour. It's good to just have that awareness and modify it as needed at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure we can all really relate to, you know, quite how frustrating it is when, you know, you've maybe got a certain event or something that you want to do, and then all of a sudden it's going to be that morning, isn't it, where you've got a little bit of a limp going on. And, you know, if you do have a few kind of, you know, a bag of tricks really that you can do, that, you know, kind of just helps ease things off. But a lot of this, I think, particularly with the balance work, I think I said before, is about giving yourself a bit more confidence in your body, because our pain response can be very frightening at times, I think. And, you know, we have this innate sort of sense that if something's hurting, it's damaged, but it doesn't always kind of, you know, connect in that way. It could be hurting just because it's hurting. So yeah, just giving ourselves a little bit of movement to go, oh, okay, I'm not going to snap in half if I go for a walk right now. So yeah, I think for me that was a large part of it, of, you know, sort of challenging myself to do a longer plank. You know, even though I couldn't walk, I can do this, so that means I'm going to be okay. And that's kind of how I try and think about it.
I can totally relate to that at the moment, because I'm going through a rib flare because of the cough I've had this last week. And so you instantly, well, certainly for me, when my ribs are flaring, it makes me kind of tense up and feel like, oh, can I do this movement? Can I do that? I'm so cautious. But doing those seated exercises were perfect, because there was so much I could do that didn't involve the ribs, but then I could do some gentle rotations and things like that and be like, okay, I can do a bit of this, a bit of that, which yeah, is really helpful.
Remembering to breathe, isn't it? And particularly if you have had any kind of respiratory stuff. And you know, I find cardio exercises really difficult, and have done, you know, ever since I was at school, really, because, you know, I've got a little bit of a twist in my spine, and, you know, you can see it on my chest x-ray that there's a curve, and, you know, one of my lungs kind of doesn't sort of, you know, function as well as the other one. And so I do like to sort of focus on the breathing, so that I'm also in control of my breathing as well as my movement. And if you can match those together, working really hard becomes actually quite relaxing. So, I mean, I was teaching last night and I can feel my abs are really sore this morning, but it was quite a slow class. So yeah, that's yeah, it's one of the things that I think is quite nice, that you don't have to do anything fancy. You know, you don't have to be standing on your head to actually get a little bit of like, oh, okay, this is really hard work. Actually, if you slow things down so you feel safe, I think it's actually more challenging than, you know, doing some kind of crazy HIIT class a lot of the time.
Absolutely, that's music to my ears. I like to take things nice and slow.
Yeah, it's just be nice, nice and safe and calm, and just, you know, get through it together, I think.
Well, for everyone who's still watching, please do pop any questions for Ruth in the comments, because we have some time to answer those. We did have a question during the session from Katie, who was asking about the resistance bands, and whether it's better to have a thinner, stretchy band or a thicker band with greater resistance. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so you've probably seen that they come in sort of a whole range of different ones. This one is just from my physio supplier, and it's kind of in the middle. And I give my clients a choice of, you know, like a slightly lighter, like medium one, or this one is kind of strong. It's not extra strong, it's not kind of really thick. And I do have one of those loop ones, which is like a very thick kind of fabric that you can use for doing your clams and things, but it's too much for me, actually. And I think having sort of something in the middle, so either a medium or a strong, you don't kind of want extra light unless you're sort of doing ballerina things with one little toe at a time. But yeah, you want some resistance so that you can feel that there is a bit of a stretch there. It's not kind of, you know, super easy, but you don't want to go so heavy that actually you're just using your larger muscle groups. So if you're using a slight bit of resistance, but nothing too heavy, we're going to then be working on that sort of ligament strength as well, and not just kind of using the belly of your larger muscles. And that's what gives you a really nice amount of sort of control over your joints, so that we're working on that, you know, basis, that we're not sort of trying to, you know, bulk anything up with kind of something very heavy. It's little kind of end of range movements that can be really helpful. Just, you know, particularly when you've got inflammation, we want to soothe things off and oil up the joints rather than making everything kind of, you know, super tight. So yeah, medium or strong, I would say, is probably best for most people. But yeah, it's just kind of, you know, you might want to have one of each depending on whether you're grading up or down that day on how you feel.
That's perfect, thank you. And actually it really ties in, Robin just commented saying how he thinks the ball's so useful in terms of, because you're focusing on that control and that balance for it to be safe, because it's not like when you're standing you can end up kind of just doing bigger movements that aren't actually doing as much. So that, yeah, that really ties in with that.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't got any other questions coming in.
Ooh.
I think You might have worn everyone out.
I know, I was feeling a bit perky today. I was like, but it does go to show actually, whenever I, notice kind of that I've got, perhaps like today I had a bit of a cranky hip, or, last week my lower back was a bit, grumbly because I was, stupidly carrying things around whilst moving house. But doing all of this stuff does make you feel better. And as we've just shown, that was quite a lot of stuff to do in, sort of 20 minutes. So you don't have to spend hours and hours doing something if you do it in a focused and controlled way. So, even if you're working from home and you have half an hour for your lunch, you could sit on your ball, do some pelvic tilts, do some little foot lifts, maybe a few slouches, and you're kind of done for the day. And I often find that actually little and often is better than doing a big session, a couple of times a week. I think it's much nicer to be, consistent and not wear yourself out too much.
Absolutely. And yeah, working from my desk this week, I'm definitely going to incorporate that rotation with the arms more, just to keep things moving.
Yeah, it should help with your breathing as well, I think, just kind of get that, rotation through the spine, as you well know.
Get my lungs working. Well, that's wonderful. I think we'll finish up there because we haven't got any more questions coming in, but I will keep an eye on the comments for the next few days. So Ruth, if you're happy to, I'll pass any questions on to you. We can post the reply in the comments if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure, lots of people are probably busy with half term as well. So if you're watching on catch up, then I'll try to answer your questions as well if you have any.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, and hope your hip eases up soon as well.
I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll get my tennis ball out under their necks for a nice little bit of stretch.
Perfect. Lovely. Well, take care. Thank you
All
to
right.
everyone who's joined us live and tried out the exercises, and we'll see you next week. And next week's session is on Tuesday, the 26th of October, and that is with Ali Potter at 10 a.m. She's going to be doing a lovely relaxation session. So do come along, get prepared just to have a nice chill out for half an hour, 40 minutes. So thanks everyone. Take care and see you soon.